Hi class, fall 22. This is child development 205, which is the same as 202. We're doing chapter 2 today. So supporting all learners. This is great. This one's all about having an even playing field, right? Have you ever tried to play a board game when somebody else is using two different rules? Have you ever tried to, I just literally ran into that not too long ago. But we play like this, like, but the rules say that, right? So again, if we have two different sets of rules, how do we measure anything accurately? How do we measure how two different kids are doing if one set of rules apply to this kid and one set of no? So you're going to see that the federal government, after they determined IDEA and all the 13 different categories, what are the rules? And I got to see some of these rules put in place when my kid was like, I want to say kinder or first. It was really, really cool. So getting the entire nation or even the state or your county on the same set of rules really just equals the playing field. Isn't that what we're all going for? Equity? Right here on campus, we want to make sure that everybody gets the same opportunities or support from the bottom so that all the opportunities are accessible. So supporting all learners, fantastic stuff. Okay, and again, jump in whenever you need to, ask a question, put it in chat, raise your hand, just talk out loud. So our book starts off with Malala Yousafzai as a Nobel Peace Prize winner. She has always advocated for women getting educated and girls getting educated. Because of that, she was shot in the face. Yeah, she survived and she got her Nobel Peace Prize for that. I mean, there's just so much. And if you click on the link, it shows you her getting her actual award. It's very sweet. And so she's still an advocate out there for educating everybody, not just girls, just everybody. Because if some of you have lived or traveled to a different country, education's not free in every country. Education's not accessible to certain people, certain classes of people, or certain genders, or you can have education, but you can have to stop here. Even in the UK, there's a test around the 10th grade that says, oh, you have a university brain or you have a trade skill brain, which is fine. I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's because what would be the difference? If you were really made for the trades, like if you just really are really hands-on and you really like to make things and use equipment, then if that's your gig, then do that, right? But if you want to do studies and research, now again, as a person with studies and research, they might not thrive in a trade skill, and vice versa. Somebody who's a tradesman might not thrive in the university arena. So, but again, there are exceptions. There are people who like to cross the lines, and those are acceptable too. So again, when we create the same playing field, the same set of rules for everybody, then we can then see the exact supports that person needs to play the game. So like, for example, if any of you ever played sports, right? Does your team have different rules than that team? Now, sometimes we'll play against another team and they're more aggressive and they're sneaky. You know, they might be doing fouls when the referee turned their head, you know, things like that. That's not different rules. That's just like a style or an integrity or a lack of integrity, but the rules are the same, right? And so people do learn how to kind of bend the rules and whatnot. But in education, we have to keep everything clean and clear, right? You literally can't say to somebody, well, you have access to this program, but you don't. That is unacceptable, especially that's what makes America different. I didn't say better or greater, but we look at people and try to do our best, but not everybody does their best. In terms of the federal government, in terms of our laws, that we make the laws the same, right? Sometimes the pulling that off isn't always done properly. When we have individual citizens are the ones who are maybe identifying things and they don't do it right. Like, again, the law is clear, people can be messy. Make sense? Now, again, we have these, how do we know this is working? And we have outcomes, right? How would you know you are getting a good grade in this class? That's an outcome, right? An outcome of doing what? X, Y, and Z. Notes, discussion boards, journal, quiz, right? So in the special education arena, remember, special education is a program, not a person. we talk about evidence-based practices. If we're doing an intervention, let's say I have a cut on my hand, and my friend told me to put olive oil on it. Put olive oil on it. That's great. It's so good, so natural, so healthy. And then I put olive oil on it, but then the cut gets nastier, it gets redder, it gets more infected. Is that an outcome? Yes. We have evidence that this particular intervention did not give us the positive outcome. Versus if I had at the same time a cut over here and I put like, the triple antibiotic ointment like Neosporin and then the Band-Aid and kept it clean and blah, 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 whatever. And then that infection went down. So we would have evidence that this intervention works and this one doesn't. There are people who only study that. We have people here in Orange County in Southern California who only study what intervention is actually working. Why use a program or an intervention that's not going to work? Right? Would you use your glasses if they were the wrong glasses? No, if they didn't work, why are you wearing them? Right? So we use these evidence-based practices that has research behind it. Okay. And then UDL, this is another one. Your first exam is going to have all acronyms, like 10 acronyms on there. So anytime you see an acronym, make yourself a note. This is my tip to you for coming to class or watching the recording. So UDL means Universal Design for Learning. Universal Design for Learning. Universal Design for Learning. Meaning we have designed curriculum or the book, or let's say third grade, all the third graders get the same book, right? It's Houghton Mifflin or whatever company has that, right? All the third graders get the same book, right? Some third graders are going to need help reading that, understanding that, having it maybe in their own language, having a larger print because their eyes need that, or have somebody read it to them, or have an audio. So everybody gets the same book, it just may be in different formats. Okay, and we'll talk about that, more about that. Differentiated instruction means sometimes the instruction has to be different for different people. Now we've talked, and you've learned this about yourself, your learning style, or we say preference, right? You may be a visual learner, an auditory learner, kinesthetic learner. Differentiated instruction is like that, but a little bit more structured. We'll talk about the structure in a minute. And then database decision making. That means that has to do with the evidence-based practices. So what they do sometimes in the United States, they'll say like the West Coast is going to use this curriculum, and then we're going to roll out this curriculum maybe in the Midwest and a different curriculum in the East. And saving for some other variables, you'll see like which one actually gave better outcomes. Now again, on the West Coast, we don't have like hurricanes and storms and blizzards and things like that. So sometimes, the curriculum can be dependent on different things too, right? And there's more people on the coast than there is in the middle. So again, there is some database decision making that over the course of decades, certain things come into place, like Common Core. That just didn't roll out overnight. And by the way, Common Core is not the devil. It's how the brain works and how it was rolled out properly or not properly. Some districts did it right. Some districts didn't support their teachers. It was rough. That was a rough one. That was a rough one. And Common Core is 100% common now. So there are no rollout issues anymore. there was 10 years ago. Okay, so for our introduction, we talk about it's sort of the things I just said. We just talk about like kids who need more help have a tendency to fall behind. If you're not getting the right supports, you're not going to make it, right? And then again, we have to have the common concept of a high quality foundation of education. If we think, oh, that person has cerebral palsy, so they don't have to do homework. Cerebral palsy doesn't affect the brain like that. So they can be very, very, very smart, right? So why are we treating them differently? Why are we feeling so sad? I see that culturally, a lot of people feel sad or sorry for people with disabilities. But I tell you what, people with disabilities don't feel sad for themselves, not for the most part. That's the body they have. That's the only body they know. And I will shut off the recording to show you a really great TED Talk. Fantastic. And how well are we educating America's students? Boy, this is the age-old question, especially in California. We have the 7th largest economy in the world, and we're 48th out of 50 in our nation for education. We have more money getting pumped through our educational system, yet we're not doing super well. But here's the thing, again, with the rules being the same, look at this basic level of partial mastery for reading. That's 2/3 of students, 64 to 66 eighth graders. So what they're saying, the partial mastery, partial meaning like, we call it emerging. I don't even say partial mastery. Mastery is here, partial mastery is less, but emerging means there's still got a ways to go, right? They haven't learned it yet. That would say like, that sounds like a C, let's say a 70%. So 2/3 of 4th graders and 2/3 of 8th graders are getting a C in reading. It's hard. Are they getting the supports they need? Right? That's hard. That's my question. 60% of 4th graders and 67% of 8th graders perform at basic level or below in math. Oof. I have to tell you, in our field of child development or just helping kids in general, a lot of times people will say, well, I'm not good at math. I just need to go into the social sciences. There is a plenty of math in the social sciences. And now that I'm using the word math and some of you are getting like cold chills down your spine, just know math is everywhere. It's okay that math is everywhere. You are doing more math than you know. I'm trying to break the trauma of around the word math. Now, with that in mind, there are specific learning disabilities that have to do with math. So maybe you're not just bad at math, you have something more that needs more support. College can help you with that. Please reach out to the SPS. Please reach out. If you're not sure, talk to me. Despite high school dropout rate is all-time low. Now, this is pre-pandemic. I don't know if that's higher or lower, but a lot of parents pulled their kids out of high school to do homeschooling or online high schooling. So again, that says 2.5 million individuals. That's a lot. If that we go on that number, 6.5%, 2.5 million individuals between 16 and 24 have not earned a diploma. That's sad. That's sad. I used to do an outreach program between Sycamore Junior High School and Anaheim High School regarding math. And about 48% of Anaheim High School at the time was dropping out, almost half, which is the closest high school to Disneyland. You know, it's like people think, oh, Disneyland, Southern California. Yeah, dropout rate's still pretty high. But again, dropouts report that they would work hard if the adults' expectations were higher. Most believe they could have graduated if they tried. How many times have you had a professor, even a professor or a teacher that said, welcome to my class, half of you are going to fail? Give me one reason why we would overshoot that expectation, right? Versus a teacher that walks in and says, welcome to my class. This class is going to be hard, but I believe in all of you can pass. And I will help you get there. Which teacher are you going to work harder for? And really the working is for yourself, but at the same time, if your environment doesn't support you, why would you try? It's called learned helplessness. And people with disabilities have learned that they get underestimated. Bullying. Ugh, we've all heard of this. I'm not underplaying bullying. Bullying is huge. Kids who have a disability are, they have a higher rate of getting bullied. And I think I can tell you, the human brain is hardwired at a very basic level to notice differences, okay? I'm not giving that as an excuse. I'm just telling you what is hardwired in all of us. The first thing we look at is this person friend or foe? Is this in my tribe or an enemy? Can this person help me and help me be safe, or can this person hurt me? So once you've established that the kid in the wheelchair is probably not going to hurt you, as a younger person, younger kids do bully. I'm assuming that adults don't, but I've seen stuff. It's terrible. But when younger kids don't understand and they get confused and they feel uncomfortable, there's this weird animalistic instinct to lash out and be like, well, I don't understand you. And so you must be weird and I'm going to call you names. For some reason, it makes people feel better. So I'm not giving any excuses. I'm just saying that you'll see young children who have not developed empathy. Empathy shows up around 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe. So if you are a kindergarten teacher or, preschool teacher, you're not going to see empathy. You're not. And you're going to hear a clear, no filtered 4-year-old that said, well, Sarah has a big brown spot on her face, like a birthmark. She's weird, right? So that's not bullying, that's developmental appropriateness. And so then you can work with that. That's an opportunity to be inclusionary at that point. But Sarah's, Sarah's just like you and me. She just has a different something on her face, just like you have different hair, you have a different shirt on, or things like that. So again, meeting kids where they're at and stopping the bullying before it starts is really the way to go. But again, think about it. I mean, would you want to stay at a school if you're bullied? Right? How many people here in the class right now have experienced bullying? I raise a hand. Or were a bully. There was one kid in high school I was really mean to, I have to say. And then he went into the military and he got all buffed out. I was like, sorry. I was like, wow. I said, I told her, I said, I was mean to you. I was so harsh on you and I apologize, He's like, no, it kind of like pushed me in a certain direction. I was like, oh, but still, like, in the 80s, I was a terror. Imagine this, like poodle perm, super blonde. I was gross. Ugh. Like if you watched like The Wedding Singer, yeah, that's me, the best friend with like the poodle perm. Oh, terrible. Yeah, we've all experienced bullying. And guess what? I'm not even talking about cyberbullying, not quite yet. I mean, this book did not consider social media really. And so maybe you went through high school and you weren't bullied or you didn't bully, but now that you have an Instagram account and like you put up your favorite picture of you on vacation and then you get all the haters, it's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so frustrating. So, but here's the thing, kids, and parents sometimes too, they listen to the kids. Mom, they're, bullying me, and the parents pull them out. And like I said earlier, we can't feel sorry for kids, but I've seen parents do it too. Oh, well, we don't really push her because, she's got disabilities. Okay, we just found out that this little 7-year-old can memorize 70 things in a row. Memorize 70 things in a row. She was like brilliant and we all underestimated her. 70 things in a row. Oh, that's just her. We don't really push her because, she's our special little girl. She can be both of those things. She is smart and your special little girl, but they are Buddhist and that was part of their culture. Well, like Buddha just wanted us to have this particular girl and, this is our family and we don't push her. We just let her do whatever she wants. It's like, that's why she's running the house, right? But bullying, no bueno, right? And again, bullying can actually have somatic responses, meaning this second to last bullet, stress-related health problems. Has anybody ever had stress-related health problems? Yes. Tightness in your chest, maybe your jaw, you're grinding, you can't sleep, your stomach's upset. Yeah, think about, having disabilities and having those things. It's terrible. Or what about a child who can't speak? They're mute or they're deaf and blind, or how do you sign something like, well, you could say, I hurt my stomach, right? There are signs, but little kids don't have the words, right? So it's really, it's hard. Bullying does exist. We as adults need to buffer and control these pieces as much as possible. It's harsh. It's harsh. If you didn't like being bullied yourself, think about it. If you were that and a disability, oof, okay. But what does this have to do with the education of students with disabilities? Okay. So again, when we expect, or at least push just a little bit, we're not saying over push somebody's abilities. We're saying push just a little bit, people can blossom, right? Here's the thing. Have you anybody here ever been underestimated? Right? So when somebody, oh, she can't do that, or he can't do that, that's too hard for that. That's too hard for her. That's too hard for him. Really doesn't make you want to do it better, or just like, all right, well, you want to underestimate me? I'm out of here. I'm going to go back to bed. Right? Same thing with kids who are disabled. I could tell you today, my announcement saying I was going to be late is my disabled child work in the system was hilarious. So we expect pretty high stuff from him, but we don't expect all from him. We always tell him, do your best, right? But today wasn't one of those do your best days. So about a month ago, he legitimately had food poisoning, and he was like violently sick at school. And so I went and picked him up, and then he was able to chill at home, and I was able to to lecture from home, which is again the bonus from lecturing on Zoom, which is like great. But twice since then, he's been, oh, I puked in the bathroom. Nobody saw it, nobody heard it, that kind of situation. And I was like, so what are we trying to get out of? And his aide, he has a one-on-one aide. His one-on-one aide said, oh, well, he, there's one homework he didn't do, and then he has a quiz or test today where he probably didn't study for. I was like, of course. So when I asked, what's your homework? And he said, no, my homework. So again, a child with disabilities who's a teenager is still going to be a teenager. Let's try to pull all the things. So today, yeah, I threw up, and I was like, I test you back. I hate to ask, but what's going on? Oh yeah, there's a test or quiz or whatever. And he forgot his homework. I was like, oh, and then the policy was for all students, if we didn't witness you throw up, you're not going home. So then I was calling them. They didn't, it was this whole thing. And then my husband called him. And then the next text was, well, he didn't like what daddy had to say. So can you call? I said, no, like, no. Because I was starting class. And so it's just this thing where it's like, that's not his disability, but part of his autism and ADHD. He has learned in his environment he kind of knows what the school policy is about throwing up and going home. He has thrown up, and I've gone picked him up. So he has in the back of my mind, if I throw up again, I'm going to get picked up. So he's trying all sides. And then my last text was like, hey, just remind him that I can take his Switch away if he's too sick to go to class. He's too sick to play with his Switch. That usually works. Yeah. So again, when we expect, so again, he is in an academic program for kids with autism related disorders. It's one of the only programs in Orange County that is academic based for kids with autism related disorders. And by the way, this kid wrote a script for a short movie yesterday. Is he smart enough to? Yeah, if he's smart enough to do that, he's smart enough to do all this other stuff. So if I just put him in a behavior program, and that happens too, behavior programs can be needed for certain kids. But then we're not using his brain. We're kind of feeling sorry for him and letting him get away with just focusing on behaviors and not academics. I mean, isn't that a shame if you have a brain that wasn't cultivated? Right? So there's a lot of people with disabilities. I mean, Albert Einstein would have been diagnosed with autism. So again, his teachers said he's no good. He's not going to amount to anything. He was nonverbal till 3. And his mom said, oh, like I got this letter from the school, and it says, you're amazing. You're a genius, but we can't help him here. So you're going to have to educate him at home. She was lying. But just that shift in mindset between you're dumb. At the time they called him a moron. That was the technical term. You're dumb. You're never going to amount to anything. His mom said, no, I don't accept that. Let's push him. And what do we have? We have theories of relativity. We have theories of black holes that Cal State Fullerton just proved and overproved and reproved. It's pretty amazing. Don't underestimate people with disabilities, right? So again, with academic and social emotional challenges, if we support them in the right ways, we are going to get better outcomes. True or true? So again, the teacher gets to first identify, right? This kid is not, I've tried this intervention, that support, and there are these structured supports. We'll talk about that. Well, I've tried all these different things, and the kid, I think, needs a referral for support. And that's okay. That's sometimes the parents see it first, sometimes the kids see it first, and we'll talk about that in chapter 4. I'm trying to get a guest speaker for that too, a special ed teacher. That'd be helpful. So again, evidence-based practice are proven. These aren't studies, these are research where they take these 2 classes and they give one set of interventions to one class, and they don't give it to the other class and see what the outcomes are, right? If you don't get a positive outcome, why use it, right? It's almost like if you're making a recipe and let's say you're making your grandmother's, favorite mac and cheese or something like that, like her tried and true recipe. And this time you added garlic or something like that. But if you can't taste the difference, would you keep adding it? I don't know, right? In education, no. If you have interventions in there and it's not making a difference, we move on. It's a tool. Why would you have the tool that doesn't work or it's not needed, right? So we also use the word as research validated, empirically validated, but I like evidence-based practices. It means that there's evidence, there's data, there's research and empirical studies. Okay. Those are just big words we don't need right now. first started in the field of medicine. So basically this scientific model, if you guys learned that in biology or even, geology, there's a scientific model to actually create a hypothesis and test it and try these different tests and isolate the variables and then research against them each other. It's the same thing in hard science as it is in social sciences. Yeah, we just, in hard science, it's usually quantitative data. There's like more larger like heat exponent here. And with us, we learn about the qualitative data about more satisfaction in work or school like that, right? So quantitative is a number, maybe like they went from a 79 in the class to an 85. That is a number that's quantitative. Qualitative was I had overall more satisfaction in this class with extra supports. Yeah, so it's very cool. I'm not going to go too hard into the research methods, but again, to see if your intervention works, you have to do this randomized controlled trial, right? So you may have heard that with like medicine, right? So let's say in a study, in a randomized controlled trial of 84 people, that means in the 84 people, half of them got the intervention, half of them didn't. And then but you as a researcher, you don't know who got whatever. So in a medicine thing, they would give the actual medicine. Let's say they were testing out a seizure medicine. They would give the actual seizure medicine to half and a placebo, like a sugar pill. Everybody would take this pill the same time every day, but then you would start to see different results. Now you as a researcher, it's randomized, so you don't know, because even as a researcher, if you know who got the good pill and not the good pill, you might have a bias. And so if it's randomized, the data will give you the proof without you having any bias there. Single case design is like watching a person longitudinally. Again, to study a person, you have to have their permission. Fidelity just means that two researchers doing the same study can get the same results. So what happens is, like, I've seen this in a classroom. Fidelity is hard because we are all different people and we see different things. Now, again, I'm the mother of a boy, I'm single mother, single child, and I see, fidgety boys is pretty normal, right? Where another researcher or professor would say, oh, that kid, he never could sit still, right? So fidelity, I might record that kid as acting age appropriate, and the other person might record that kid as being a troublemaker. So we have to look at our language and our conceptions and our bias as we're researching, right? So, and everybody has bias. Everybody has bias. We talked about that. So everybody has bias, but here's the thing. In science, we can't have bias, or else the research is no good, right? We have to make sure every step is clean and clear. Okay? So again, I'm not going to hit it down too hard because I sort of described this already. Again, we have this randomized control. Again, we don't know who's getting the intervention or the placebo, right? But then we see which ones works, right? The quantity of evidence needed, then it's considered strong. Again, if it's not strong, we don't use it, right? If the answers to both questions are no, one may conclude that the intervention is not supported, right? If we see that it's working, it's strong. If it's maybe working, not so strong, right? And we'll talk more about this. I don't want to hammer research methods too hard. If you end up transferring to Cal State Fullerton and you get an undergrad in psych or sociology, there's an entire class on research methods. I took it. It was rough, but it's not horrible. It just talks about all these different types of variables and what you're looking for. So again, let's get to UDL. UDL is the actual scientific method in the classroom, not in a lab, not in a theory paper, but in the classroom. Okay. So universal design for learning. I want you to think of this as the rules of the game. Okay. All right. So UDL, make sure you know this acronym. Okay. The school curriculum is the same, right? All first graders get the same curriculum, all the second graders. So, and we know based on our evidence-based practices that by the end of kindergarten, kids should know this. By the end of first grade, kids should know this, right? Same thing, by the end of this class, you'll see on our first part of our syllabus, the student learning outcomes. By the end of the class, you guys should know this, right? We level the playing field, and then we put supports in there to reduce barriers for success. It's a really basic concept, but at the same time, once you get your mindset wrapped around everything is equal. Again, think about this, even at college, because the community college, we are technically 13th to 14th grade. We are a public school. Yeah. So we have these same rules apply to us. right? So here's the thing. You may have, maybe you took a class, let's say you took Anthropology 101, but you didn't make it for some other reason, you had COVID or whatever, and you had to drop it, and then you came back and you took it again, but you took it from a different professor. And then you're like, well, wait a minute, this other professor's harder, or, it's the same book, but this professor does it differently, and it's way harder. It's not fair. So we are trying to cut down on that stuff. I can tell you in child development, our curriculum is set by a statewide consortium. So again, here at SAC 205, the consortium says there's a few updates, right? SEC, we made the updates, and SAC will come on board pretty soon. Excuse me. So there's this piece where as the suggestions come from the state level, we implement them. I teach them exactly the same. I put in the 2 cents. Again, we talked about trauma. Trauma is not really included in our book, but it's part of the newer updates. And so we will be talking about that here because, of course, you guys need the newest stuff, right? So the federal legislation is the IDEA. That is an acronym. You will need to know that. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Okay. That is under ADA. There's another acronym, Americans with Disabilities Act. Under ADA, we have IDEA. ADA covers every person, every building in the United States, everywhere. Those are the laws, right? The curb cuts, like the little scoop outs to cross the street, the little dots on the corners, elevators in buildings, standardized lights, standardized walk, don't walk, the beeps, Braille on federal buildings. I have right here right next to my desk an sign that says exit, and there's Braille on it, right? Those are federal standards, right? Those are the big picture standards, but education has IDEA. So make sure you know ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. IDEA is a carve out for education, right? And then Higher Education Opportunity Act of 2008. That came into place because a lot of students with disabilities weren't even going into college. So that was a reminder for all colleges to invite people with disabilities in, right? And have more support systems. That's how we have DSPS, right? And Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015. That was an Obama. ESSA. So these all have acronyms. Okay. Obama put into place a newer program because the older program, it was good, but it kind of like we outgrew it. So he kind of renamed No Child Left Behind. So you might see that show up in the, it's important, but it's in the past, right? And now we have ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. And what that means, and we'll talk more about that, but what that means is that it's not up to the child to succeed. We don't put the ownership of success on the child. Yes, they do the work, but the buy-in and the skin in the game and the consequence and responsibility is on the adult. Yeah, right. So you don't come into my class and I go like, whatever, you can study whatever, and it's up to you to, get your A. Yes, but no. It's my job to make things less confusing, which there's always a little bit of confusion, but it's my job to present this information in a dynamic and organized manner so you guys can succeed. If I'm being disruptive, if I'm being disorganized, if I'm being super duper confusing, that it's not fair. How can you guys succeed if I'm creating the barriers? So Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015 and the Higher Education Opportunity Act of 2008 is present in this class right now. So is IDEA. We don't, in college, we don't normally, I don't normally get copies of IEPs, but I will get a notification from DSPS that says this student needs accommodations and modifications. This student might need less questions on a test or more time to take the test or a note taker, things like that. Those are how we support the 504 or the IEP in college. Yeah, absolutely. So these 3 things will be on your test. So write those down, put those in your notes. Now, UDL is based on 3 principles, okay? What content, how they learn, and why they're learning. What does that sound like? What? right? What we're learning, how we're learning it, that's your style, right? But it is my job to have it in different ways so you can use your style, right? And then in which ways are the students motivated or interested by their own learning? That's the reflection. Whoa, universal design for learning still shows up in our class. Yeah, right? Again, why would I model something different than what you guys are going to need to do in your own future classroom? Oh, by the way, if you say, well, I'm not going to be a teacher, I'm going to be an SLP, I'm going to be a speech language pathologist, OTPT, nurse practitioner, I'm going to be a cop. Well, guess what? All these things fall under IDEA, which falls under ADA. Every police officer has to know ADA, has to know that you can't discriminate, right? Things like that. So I was actually at a store the other day here in Orange, and it had a wider door. And I was super excited because I didn't think this was something that would, I didn't think it was a store that would actually think of people with disabilities, and the door was wider, and clearly a wheelchair could fit in there. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you guys so much for having a larger egress for people in a wheelchair. And the lady like looked at me, I was like, just ignore me. I was just like, I just love where people are accommodating and including people versus discluding people. Because if a wheelchair can't fit through a door, do you know they can sue the owner of that building or the building? Yeah, not the owner of the store, but this owner of the building. And trust me, people will go around and do that because there's a lot of money to be made if people aren't keeping up with ADA. What? Okay. So check this out. This is in our book, but Universal Design for Learning Guidelines. Now you're going to see a 1, a 2, and a 3. Okay. So the 1 here, they don't mean 1 is better, middle, and higher, right? It just means that these are the 3 areas that we talked about here. Okay. Content, the way students learn, and why the students are learning. So we do this piece, and if you go down, you'll see the 1.1, 1.2, and then 2.1 and 3.1, right? So representation means multiple means of representation, meaning provide options for perception, meaning I'm trying to make sure there's offer ways of customizing the display of information. You guys have Canvas, you can move some things around. You can use the calendar feature, you could not use it, right? Things like that. Offer alternatives for auditory information. I have these recording, you can just listen to it. Sometimes I listen to stuff while I'm doing other things. Offer alternatives for visual information, recordings. I know not all professors do it. I think it's important. And again, part 2 talks about provide options for language, math, and expression and symbols. Now, if we were doing a face-to-face class, and you'll see in our discussion boards later, but I'll have you put together some art and share a picture of that. Doing different things, not just like this boring one-on-one, like, Zoom thing. This is a little flat, it's not the classroom. But for your schedule and my schedule, that way works out best. You can stop this recording, you can play it later, you can listen to it in the car, blah, blah, blah. But here's this piece, like if we are all doing one thing in one way, it's not going to include different brains. Some people need it in their hands to understand. In fact, when you are in my classroom, I usually make you, like I pull out the art, like let's make UDL in some sort of 3D model. What? Yeah, well, I would normally do that in the classroom, super fun. I have straws and pipe cleaners and whatever kind of things, Play-Doh. And then options for comprehension, right? Activate or supply background knowledge. That means everybody comes into this field with some background knowledge, right? What are the patterns, critical features, big ideas? This is, again, asking you, right? I'm giving you information, right? Maximize transfer and generalization. You'll see similar things in our book that start to get into a pattern, the pattern of the modules. It helps us get those higher order thinkings in line there. Number 2, provide multiple means of action and expression. Some kids aren't great with putting answers on paper, but they can say it out loud. Vary the methods for response and navigation. So here you guys can talk out, you can put it in the chat, you can tell me later, you can raise your hand, whatever. Optimize access to tools and assistive technologies. We'll talk a lot about AT, and it's another acronym, AT, assistive technologies. And then provide options for expression and communication. So again, my kid has dysgraphia. He writes like a kindergartner. That's just how his brain is. and that's normal for that type of brain. And not everybody's handwriting is good, right? Mine's terrible as well, but so he can audio type into his Chromebook. He can also, he also has as an accommodation a scribe. He can have somebody else type it for him as long as he's not manipulating. And then provide options for executive functions. Now, executive function is huge. We'll talk a lot about that in chapter 7 with ADHD. That means this is your secretary in your head. This executive functioning in the frontal lobe of the brain, which is the last thing to form in kids with ADHD. This is the, I should get my book out of my backpack before I put my backpack in the locker. Doing things in the right order. ADHD doesn't always do that. So executive functions, meaning like goals, there's a lot of different ones. Goal setting, planning and strategy development, facilitate managing information and resources, and enhance capacity for monitoring progress. Executive functioning is a lot. This is hard for a lot of kids, right? And not just kids with disabilities, but all these areas are opportunities for us to support them. So again, if you have a kid who's like dialing it all in, except for right here in their executive functioning, support planning and strategy development, this is where an adult would say, hey, what do you think needs to happen next? Or what would be a better way of doing that next time? Or would you like me to write you a note? Or should we do a reminder on our phone? So it's a few suggestions from a higher functioning adult can really help develop these areas of deficit. That makes sense? We're going to take a break after this slide and like process a few things. Last part is provide multiple means of engagement. Wow. Okay. So have you ever had a class where you were forced to do a speech, maybe like COM, right? And, you know, sometimes they do, you know, dyads or group work, but you were forced up to do it. You know, sometimes kids will literally fall apart. I mean, I've seen some pretty interesting anxiety disorders, you know, I'm not judging because I've got a lot of anxiety myself, but I've never had anybody die presenting in class. I've never had anybody pass out. I've had a lot of people say, oh, that wasn't so bad. But again, are we allowing for different sources of opportunities? Right. Okay. Again, give them more individual choice and autonomy. If you say, we're going to do this project, I do remember this in my 8th grade, like honors English class. She says, we're going to study Shakespeare and, or no, we were going to do Shakespeare at the end, but early on she was getting us more comfortable with ourselves. And she said, I want you to find your favorite poem and present it. You can present it anyhow you want to. And I had at the time at 8th grade started enjoying singing. So I sang it. I sang a poem and she was like, that was it. Some kids just went up there and talked about it. Some people did a skit, some people did a thing, and I just went up there and sang it. So, and that was just my wheelhouse. I was just comfortable for me. So, provide options for sustaining effort and persistence. Ooh, heighten the salience of goals and objectives. Anybody know what that means? This is a $3 word, salience. Anyone? Anyone? Salience is a fancy word of importance. Heighten the importance of goals and objectives. Salience means like, is it important right now? Basically, if you have a kid when you're saying, well, don't you want an A in this class? And they're like, why do I need an A? I'm just going to drop out and go into construction like my uncle. Right? So again, you have to connect to those multiple means of engagement. Heighten the salience of goals and objectives. Salience also makes it pertinent, makes it applicable, makes it something that kids understand, right? So again, I ask a lot in this class, what are you going to do with this information, right? Kids don't always put those 2 and 2 together, but adults can. You guys can. So heighten the salience of goals and objectives, right? So what? There's student learning outcomes on our syllabus. What's the point? Well, one of them says, do we know different disabilities? You will at the end of this class, right? And why is it salient? Why is it important? Because you will run into these kids in your life or your career. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. And this last part, provide options for self-regulation. Ooh, that is tough. Self-regulation. Self-regulation is, can I sit in my seat still? Can I fail a test and not lose my mind? Can I not pull a full Karen right now because I'm mad at the teacher? Right? Self-regulation. A little bit of disappointment is a skill to build. My son last week, he did a big no-no, and he was not allowed to go to the Iron Maiden concert at the Honda Center. It would have been his first concert as a teenager with his dad. He did a big no-no the day before, and wow, his response was big. He broke furniture. Yeah, it was big. And it was this piece about self-regulation. We can only help with a certain amount of self-regulation. Kids in a classroom can get really, really big. They can pull a full Karen and clear the classroom. My kid was doing that at 5 and 6 and 7. Also has to do with the teacher not being able to control all the variables. So again, I'm talking about an extreme case here, but again, kids sometimes when they get disappointed and their self-regulation goes more like depressed, they stop trying. So again, putting all these pieces together gives a child a way to move forward, a way to understand the bigger picture. Don't talk to them like babies. Don't underestimate them. Talk to them like you would a regular person, because they are a regular person. They just haven't been on the planet long enough. And even with a disability, nobody likes to be talked like, oh, hi, how are you today? Like, nobody likes to be talked down to, right? But again, options for self-regulation is like, oh, that was disappointing. How are we going to handle that? Well, I'm going to be mad for a while, or I'm going to kick something over, or I'm going to be sad for a little bit. Okay, so let me know when you're ready to get back on track. I'm here for you, right? Facilitate personal coping skills and strategies. Guess what? Here's my late policy. You guys are a little bit late on stuff. I just go, let me know what's your plan. Not my plan, your plan. Again, this helps you get to know yourself better. A lot of you got it dialed in. A lot of you are still learning. This is what college is for. This whole piece right here, this is the monopoly rules for content. This is monopoly rules for content, not behaviors, content. And so I'll show you the other one for behaviors too. But okay, again, develop self-assessment and reflection. So, I mean, some of you are like, hey, I got like a 72% on the exam. I'm down. That's cool. I'm good. Some of you are like, I got a 92 and like, I'm a little bit suicidal, so I need to call my therapist. Right? So, and I'm not undercutting that, because I had somebody drop my class because they turned in notes late, like one note late. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I need to drop. I was like, please don't. It's 10 points. You can miss 10 of those and still get an A in this class. Like, stop. That's another reason why I made the policy open. So people don't lose their mind when something's late, because you just had your days confused that day. You thought it was Tuesday and it was really Wednesday. Like, breathe, right? So again, UDL, the important word in here is learning. Universal design for learning. Okay. When I say universal design for our architecture, that's our curb cuts and our signs and our braille. That's UDL for architecture. But excuse me, universal design. That's the basic of universal design. The universal design for learning is content in the class. Not how the class is set up, not how the board is set up, not the technology, not the behavior stuff. This is just content. This is just curriculum. UDL is for all curriculum. Yeah, all curriculum. Makes sense? And then we'll talk about what it is for behavior. That's coming up next. Okay, so UDL in a 5th grade language arts class. Let me see if I can get this going, and I'm going to pause the recording. I'm going to hit pause recording. Resume recording. I did skip a couple slides regarding UDL, but again, those are in the PowerPoint. You guys can watch those and check in. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. So I sort of gave this instruction, but I missed 1, 2, 3. Yeah, content, process, and product. Make sure you know those things, and I will answer those questions if you missed those in the video because I forgot to record. Okay, so how does differentiated instruction differ from UDL? So again, universal design for learning. These are the playing. This is the playing field. These are the rules. Differentiated instruction means that we have. They're both frameworks, and they're both using regular special ed, but one is responsive. If a kid is not getting it, maybe we have to change the mode, the model, the way they're understanding it, the process, the product, right? Again, it involves adjustments here, right? So consider this the bigger framework. The UDL is the bigger framework, and then differentiated instruction is these little tweaks that you can have inside of the UDL. Make sense? Okay. And we talked prior about database decision making. Again, if there's no data to support these interventions, we're not using them. Okay, same thing, same thing. Again, this is like maybe like a pre-test and a post-test. Yeah, you'll see that in preschool and kindergarten, like, oh, like, can they recognize letters and how high can they count? Or there's a grid with numbers and they can fill in the numbers, you know, it's like 1 to 100 and things like that. And you know what? And then you could say, well, at the beginning of the year, they only knew 12 letters. And at the end of the year, they knew all 26, right? So sometimes just getting a database, like a touch point or a mid touch point helps as well. 3 common types of assessments for data. So diagnostic, right? Taking an actual test. This is before a pre-test, right? Formative assessment is that more personal reflection conducted as instruction progresses. What are we learning? What stuck out to you, right? Okay. And then summative, this is at the end. This is like a final, a cumulative final conducted at the end of an instructional period. I don't believe in summative assessments only because, well, I guess our quizzes are a summative of that particular chapter or module, but it's only 10 points. But I don't believe in midterms and finals because what we learn in our classes, they build on each other, right? Every chapter builds on itself, but it's not like you are adding to your knowledge until the end. Our knowledge here is very nebulous because we're talking about humans, right? We're talking about how we progress in our skills and our knowledge. And so I don't believe in midterms and finals. I used to, and then I learned that's not necessarily helpful. Again, so same thing, diagnostic, formative, and summative. It just kind of gets you another instruction, another way of looking at that. See, again, here it is. Here's your content in words. Here's your content in pictures. Yeah. So am I giving you different ways to look at the content? You betcha. Okay. How can teachers determine if students are responding? Ooh, so this is a good one, progress monitoring. This means let's look at how they're doing on their way to mastery, on their way to their goal, right? So mastery measurement, it means it's like we're looking at, you know, let's say this unit we're learning about, in math, we're learning about fractions, but this week we're learning about adding fractions. So we just test them on adding fractions. And I don't know if you remember this, but you would get a page at the beginning that said, like, for this part, let's say you were doing algebra, and everyone's like, ew, I don't want to take algebra. And then your teacher just sat you with this one piece of paper just at the beginning class, and you just try to do as many as you could. And maybe you only got 6 right, but it would have adding fractions, subtracting fractions, dividing fractions, multiplying. And of course, you don't know all this stuff. So maybe you only got 1 or 2 right out of 10. That's great. But at the end of the semester, they kind of touch base through the semester. And so just looking at adding fractions, maybe you are really good at adding fractions and subtracting fractions. But when it comes to multiplying and dividing, that's where your skills dropped. So you can say, I did a little mastery measurement for the student, and I could see where he or she could add and subtract fractions when they came to multiplying, dividing. There was, you know, there's a little bit lower results on that, or they need more supports there. General outcome measurements, meanings like, this is the samples of skills over one domain. How are they in math? How are they in reading? How are they in writing over the entire year? And then probes are teeny ones. Teeny tiny, like, it's like when his teacher says, hey, do you remember when we talked about, it's Monday morning, but we talked about adding and subtracting fractions last Friday. Let's remember, let's do a quick little test to see what you remember. So a probe is just testing a quick little one, just a quick little one. So this would be the shortest, this would be a little bit longer, and then this would be at the end of the year, end of the semester. Yeah. So again, a lot of times people don't say MMs or GOM, but you will hear the term probe or formative assessment or a summative assessment, things like that. Again, if the students aren't doing well, that just gives you more ideas that they need more support, right? So here's a mastery measurement probe. If you look right here, they are all plus. These are all adding fractions. And in here, out of this entire page right here, you could even learn that a student is great with single digit adding, single digit adding, single digit adding. But when it comes to double digit adding, they may mess up. They may, even though the denominator is the same, it might throw them off, right? Or they just haven't built their skill up enough to be confident that you're not adding 17 and 17. You see what I'm saying? So there's things in this one sheet that has all this, literally the same problems that you can discern. You can pick out what that student's good at or not good at. Now, this one is a full probe on all math. This is a quick one. How are we doing on that? And you might be surprised here. You might have a student who's, you're like, oh, they're never going to get the division, but maybe their brain just works that way, right? Or something like this throws them off because it's 3 lines, right? Because to carry a number over and remember and all the little tricks of the trade, or just reading that this one here is a minus, not a plus, maybe they read it wrong, right? Or they got stressed out towards the end, you know, and they just started writing in any number. So you can get a lot from quick little probes like this, right? It's just quick little probes. One is all the same, one is all different. But then you can also, because I could tell you, even my son, he's not bad at math. He can do a lot in his head, which kind of sucks because no teacher wants that, right? But as an adult, that's all we do. I don't pull out the calculator for a lot of stuff. I kind of group things and make a big guess or whatever. But there's a weird thing where sometimes when he's super frustrated, I say, go sit over there and I'll just yell it out. Because sometimes if he's super frustrated, he knows the answer to 6 times 8, but he's super frustrated. And I'm like, okay, what's 6 times 8? He's like, I don't remember. Okay, well, what's 6 times 4? It's like 24. I'm like, okay, so add 24 and 24. He's like, oh yeah, that's 48. He gets the answer, but he needs accommodations and modifications to get the correct answer on the paper. Does that make sense? So it's interesting. You guys will get these. Again, this class is an intro. Once you get into your classrooms, you will see these things. You will see these things. Don't freak out because it's math. Because guess what? Your teachers may have been doing these on you to see where you're at. And some of us have strengths and weaknesses. It's fine. Okay. All right. All right. We'll walk off of math. One of my personal goals is to get people more comfortable with the word math. I think we all have math trauma. You had like a 3rd grade teacher who told you, you're never going to be good at math. And you're like, why am I remembering that since I was 9? You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, you don't have to be a mathematician to be okay with math. Think of it as a relationship with math. It's like math is all around you. If you're trying to get a discount on, you know, use a coupon, that's math. You're trying to make a recipe at home, that's math. If you're trying to run who your stats are for fantasy football, that's math. If you're trying to like hope, you know, the Raiders win or whatever, they're 2-1 or 2-0, like that's math. What about gas prices? That's math. Like taxes, that's math. Come on, we are going to be okay. And if we're scared about math, kids are going to see that we're scared about math, and then our society never really progresses with math. Think of it. Think of it. If we're all scared of math, who's going to progress in math? Just very few people. We can get more comfortable with math. Trust me on this one. I'm not amazing with math, but I won't let it win. Maybe I'm more stubborn than that, but like, okay. Now we're going to see that there is a similar process. There's a similar process for behaviors. Whoa. Okay. So now that we have this UDL in the classroom, we have this framework, this parts 1, 2, and 3, and 3 sections, right? We have this framework. It literally is a frame. Okay. What do we do with behaviors? Because I can tell you in that framework of UDL, there's going to be some pushback. When there is pushback, let's see what kind of framework it is. So we use this term, multi-tiered system of support. So MTSS is a way to look at how the student is progressing academically and behaviorally. Think of like 2 different pyramids right next to each other. Like when we look at the pyramids in Egypt, there's like 3 pyramids sitting next to each other, right? So RTI is response to intervention. Write that down. You will need to know that for your test. And PBIS is positive behavior intervention supports, I believe. Let me double check. It's been a minute. Hold on. So RTI and PBIS are frameworks. RTI is academics, PBIS is behavior. So let's keep moving. RTI, this means that if a kid's not getting it and we've given them an intervention, response to intervention, are they responding after this intervention? If not, we move on to the next intervention. If not, we move on to the next intervention. And after 3, then we do a referral. Okay. So MTSS, there's 3 tiers. And again, there are 2 types of MTSS, 2. One is RTI and one is PBIS. So think about, again, another umbrella here, multi-tiered systems of support. We have RTI, response to intervention, which is interventions in the classroom based on content. And then we have PBIS, which is positive behavior information support and intervention supports. So again, first tier is high quality instruction that all students get. Again, this is like the announcement in our class. I'm giving everybody the same information, high quality reminders, and I expect this, and we're doing all this together, right? Some kids don't get it in the classroom the first time, right? The secondary intervention, okay, provides additional supports, moderate intensity. Like sometimes kids are having a hard time because they can't divide fractions and they, kick their desk and you're like, hey, let's go take a walk. Let's just walk it off. We're gonna be okay. It's, or I failed that test and I'm, kids get mad at themselves or they, it's tough. It's tough. So just a little bit of support. Sometimes this is like, all right, X, Y, and Z, come over and work with me here in this small group while X, Y, and Z works on X, Y, and Z, right? So sometimes a small group is all they need for second intervention or a reminder, right? Like reminders on Canvas. Tertiary intervention, the 3rd tier, provides intensive individualized interventions to students for whom secondary supports. Again, if you got it in the 1st tier, we don't need to move forward. If you got it on the 2nd tier, we stop there. But if you haven't gotten it on the 2nd tier, we move to the 3rd tier. And sometimes that's like referral to homework support or push in for somebody else, right? Or a referral to, somebody into the class or somebody outside the class again. And again, how those things are accessed is usually on the inside of the school system. So everything is a little bit differently, but these, again, this is the rules. This is like saying, playing a board game and you start here and you go here and you do this. These are the instructions. Primary, secondary intervention. And primary, secondary, tertiary. I will ask you on which ones of these are which on the quiz or the test. Okay. So look at it this way. I like visuals. And I like how we have it in words and then we have it in visuals. So primary intervention, it's everybody here. Everybody gets the same instruction. Everybody gets the same instruction. Make sense? And so everybody gets the same instructions, right? And so even like in this class, when somebody like comes in late, I was like, hey, I just want to let you know this is what we're talking about, just to catch them up, right? So they're not lost. Then there's like some of the students come here. So small group targeted instruction, right? And then the next up here might be less, it will be less students because not everybody needs this high level of support up here, right? But it might be working with a one-on-one in the classroom. It might be going to homework support, right? Yeah, it makes sense. So the whole class, some who didn't get it and some who didn't get it again. And that's okay, right? Makes sense? Yeah. So and that's about right. So it's only like 1 or 2 in a classroom who just maybe aren't thinking clearly. I mentioned trauma earlier. In the class, and we'll have a guest speaker at some point. And if kids witnessed domestic violence in the home the night before, their brain can still be like not regulated enough to learn. Yeah. So yeah, it could be anything. It could be a student who's like normally really, really smart and just like is having a bad day and just not getting it, right? Or they're coming down with the flu, or has some other ailment, or is distracted, or got bullied, or you never know. But again, these supports are in place. It doesn't matter who's doing what. The supports are in place. Makes sense? Now, you may get students who are here all the time and the tertiary interventions all the time. Then we'll talk about maybe, they get a referral for an IEP or a 504. Maybe we're expecting too much from them, right? But we start with universal design. Now, PBIS is another form of an MTSS. Again, we're talking acronyms. MTSS is multi-tiered systems of support. And RTI is the education. This is in the classroom. PBIS is positive behavioral interventions and supports. PBIS. Sounds like PBS, like our local free station, right? This is behavior management. So if I ask you, is PBS for behavior management or academics? What do we say?
Behavior.
Yeah, behavior. So I have to tell you something. What it doesn't tell you in here is that this includes the parents. Wait, what? PBIS, but the parents aren't in school. Well, behaviors are supported at home and supported in the classroom, right? So what this looked like at my son's school when he was like in kinder and first, they rolled these out. They rolled these out and said, it's almost like they got an update to the behavior rules, right? So have you ever been somewhere and like you did something that was normal for you and they're like, oh, we don't do that here, right? But how would you know if you didn't have the rules? So they posted all these rules everywhere. So they did things like, in the library, you use a quiet voice and calm body. On the playground, you can use a loud voice and a big body, but as long as you're not touching your friends. So they put all these different rules all over the campus, including the parking lot. Why? Why would they include the parking lot?
I don't know, maybe to like prevent accidents.
Accidents, or people honking at each other, yelling at each other, or just cutting down on the chaos. Again, kids learn what they see. So if you have parents like, cutting each other off and honking and doing all the business, the kids are going to pick that up too. And positive behavior intervention supports, it really starts the second they get out of the car. So if there's like yelling and screaming and chaos as they're getting out of the car, how are they going to have a calm day, right? So it was great. And here's the thing, they did just put posters up at the campus. They literally walked the kids through. They said, okay, we're going to, like, not during recess, but we're going to run to recess and we're going to pretend that we have recess body. Show me recess body. Woo! Okay, now we're going to walk to the computer lab. Show me computer lab. Quiet voices, Oh, now we're going to walk to the library. Now we're going to walk to the cafeteria. So they walk, and then, when we walk between the classrooms, we walk nice and we use like a medium voice. But if we're in the classroom, we use this kind of what you like. So they literally gave them examples. They didn't just put up posters and say, figure it out. Right. So if you're changing the rules, it's almost like anytime you have to agree to terms of service, like whatever you like, your bank or app or like Uber or whatever, like, and they say we have an update to our terms of service. This was like an update to the terms of service, right? And you can't they didn't ask you to hit I agree without giving you the whole thing. They gave you the whole thing whether you read it or not, right? But you have to have these same rules everywhere on campus. Do you see what I'm saying? Again, it's like leveling the playing field, leveling the instructions, expecting the same behavior. We don't say, oh, well, Johnny's parents donated like $400 so he can like hit kids and run around and scream. Nope. No, not at all. So again, but here's the deal. Some kids, it's hard to follow these body rules, these behavior rules. It is. Their brains are different. They're impulsive. Like, again, how many times when you were a kid, when like somebody tried to cut in line for the water fountain, what did you say? Back of the line. No cuts, no butts, no coconuts, right? And it's the same thing. Those are the rules. Those are the rules, right? So again, when people follow the rules, there's less chaos. But some kids, it's hard to. Okay. So we also say primary, secondary, and tertiary. We also say that here. Okay. And I'm trying to figure out where's the picture. Here we go. Okay. So here over here, behavior instruction. This is PBIS right here. This is right from our book. All the students get these universal interventions, all settings, preventative and proactive. Then the secondary intervention, this is like the kid who's like, okay, we're walking to the multi-purpose room to watch a movie, and one kid runs from the back of the line and runs up. No, But that kid does it all the time because, you know what, maybe you don't know this because the kid didn't tell you, or we missed them on a screening, is that the kid wants to sit up in the front like all kids, but he can't see so good. And so he doesn't say, I need to sit up in the front because I don't see so good, but he's getting in trouble for running. So there's little things like this. Once you see this kid running all the time, you're like, hey, what's really happening? And then maybe it comes out, yeah, well, my eyes aren't so good when it's dark in the room. Oh, like, oh, okay. So yeah, come over here and sit up front. You don't have to run. I'll save you a spot up at the front. And then let's get a referral for your eyes to get checked. See, these things are just clues that clue us into that there may be more supports needed there. Okay. Because here's the bottom line, the kid doesn't have to run. And if he's not running, he's not disrupting. Plus his body's regulated. So isn't it interesting how we can come in and kind of like provide the supports that are needed and not have the student be in charge of themselves? They're young, they can't be in charge of themselves. Good. And then tertiary interventions, this is more. You might have, where it says assessment based, you might have a kid who truly has ADHD or some other impulsive disorder. We'll talk about all of those as we move forward, chapter 5 forward. But again, intense durable procedures. This is my kid. He's had a one-on-one aid since first grade. He's extremely impulsive. Things that run through his mind, they come out of his body, definitely come out of his mouth. But his aide is like here to say, hey buddy, remember last time you got in trouble for running. So let's just remember, even if you're in the back of the line with me, you're still going to get a good spot. So just like that. So he has a high level of intentions, supports all the time for his behaviors, right? So it looks exactly the same. Have you noticed that? So RTI and PBIS, they look exactly the same, but which one is for academics?
RTI.
RTI, Jessica wins again. Which one is for behavior?
PBIS.
Yes. So that could be confusing, but we made it the same, so it's not confusing. Does that make sense? So you might hear some words inside of PBIS. Scaffolded instructions means very supportive instruction, right? Very similar to what you saw. And then FBA, we'll talk about this more in the IEP chapter. A functional, it's an assessment to see, why does this kid run? Why is the kid running every time? Right? You see what I'm saying? I've heard of stories where kids were running like running to get the ball at recess because there was one ball that wasn't upsetting him like sensory wise. And if he didn't get there first, he wouldn't get that ball. And then if he had another ball that he couldn't touch it, it was a little bit more sensory processing. So we go through this assessment to figure out, oh, okay, well, this kid has sensory processing. Can we have a separate ball for him? Because a separate ball, he gets his ball, but he doesn't have these massive behaviors where we have to call the resource guy. So you see what I'm saying? So there's these different things that we can put into place, but an FBA only happens with an IEP. And we'll talk about that more in chapter 4. Yeah. Again, you'll see. So again, I told you my son was talking about, oh, I threw up today. You're like, oh, really? Did you not do your homework, or is there a test on deck? Like, you could see his behaviors are connected to something he's trying to avoid. We'll talk about different functions of behaviors too, which is great. You're like, oh, I've had kids where the teacher goes, okay, pull out your math book, and the kid bolts out the door. The FBA is pretty clear. It's fun. So summary, we got through it, you guys. We got through it. There's a lot. This is, an hour and a half of a lecture, but yeah. And then we'll go through the module. I'll walk you guys through the module at the end. Whew. Supporting all learners. This is not, how many of you thought this was going to happen in special ed class? I thought we were just going to learn about special ed. Well, special ed means we got to talk about the rules first. Yeah. So RTI and PBS, this is huge, huge. I do have a friend who is a RTI instructor, and I'm trying to get her to do a little bit of but she works during the day. I'm trying to get her to do a little bit of a guest speaker piece, because she is like the tertiary person where the teacher will say, oh, we did the global prompts for this instruction, math. And then I got him in I got the small group to work on it. But these 2 kids in the small group, they're still not getting it. So they sent him to my friend Amy. And she just got her master's. Ironically, she got her master's in reading, but she's doing RTI on math because you can, right? But but here's this piece. So I wanted her to talk about these different levels and how she supports students. And some people are just really good about getting to know a kid and getting to know how their brain works and what's going to help them. And when they have these little behaviors like, oh, my stomach hurts. Oh, okay. Sorry to hear that. Let's get a drink of water and let's get back to work. Like, the mom who's already a mom and is not letting the kids get away with it. She's fantastic at it. I'm so blessed that I have so many friends in different areas of education that I can bring in for you guys. And so I'm really trying to do that, is do more guest speakers. And speaking of that, I'm going to shut off the recording.